guys, Sullivan here in Philadelphia. So it occurred to me just today as I was about to place yet another weekly perennial order, because I can shop from the local wholesale plant distributors now, that I need to stop and focus on trees and shrubs for a little while. I have to say, this is a very odd feeling for me. I often just kind of plow through things, and I was actually getting into kind of a groove with working on each bed in sections and building up perennials for it, and then getting a section filled every 2 weeks or so. And it's easy to get caught up in because of the plant availability, just the floral market changes every week. So it's easy to get caught up in oh, I love that plant, I have to get it right now. I decided to take a step back from that and focus on refining my shopping list for trees and shrubs. Putting perennials on hold, because let's face it, perennials will always be there, even next year. So if I'm missing out on some May perennials because I decide to focus on trees and shrubs, May comes again. It'll be here next year. And I didn't get to do this last year because last year we had stay-at-home spring and the garden centers and everything were closed. So I actually think that it's to my advantage that I wasn't able to rush out and spend a ton of money last year on big trees and shrubs. I've had a lot of time. I've had almost 2 years to figure out what I want to do in these spaces. One of the challenges, I think, in this project of adding larger structural trees and shrubs to my garden plans is that there's a myth in the plant world, just like there is in the cut flower world, that you can get anything you want at any time of the year. That's just not the case. So while I'm going to lay out for you my design plans, and there are some things very specifically that I'm looking for, and some things that there are a few choices depending on what I find, you really cannot just snap your fingers, even with the internet, and make a plant appear. It doesn't work that way. And this is a huge pet peeve, especially in the wedding industry. And I'm looking at internet magazine articles that tell girls that they can have peonies, dahlias, or flowering branches any time of the year. All you need to do is look around. There are no peonies certain times of the year. There are definitely no dahlias more than 3 or 4 months of the year. And flowering branches only happen in spring. In fall, they are fall branches where the leaves are falling off. So that's a sidebar. The good news here is that I've had 2 years to think about this. I have spent 2 years browsing plant websites, taking photos of things, researching measurements, looking at the sun conditions in basically every corner of my garden. So I feel really prepared now to go do this. And I also have a pretty good idea of how much of my annual garden budget I'm going to need to allocate for certain things. It's probably better that I couldn't go out last year. I mean, obviously it would have been better for there not to be a global pandemic. But it gave me the opportunity to pump the brakes on, I think I'm going to make some better choices for it. I hope that this will be 3-part series. So today we're going to kind of lay out the plan and the shopping list for some of the areas. And then I will bring my camera with me as I go out into the world in the next month or so to try and round up trees and shrubs to fill in some of these design plans. And then we'll get to see what actually gets here and gets into place and what I need to keep looking for. And I do really love the fact that I can look back at all these different drawings and think about and see what changes, because again, just like how I shop for flowers for an event palette, I am open to surprises. I might go out to a nursery and there might be some either new introductions, or they started carrying plants from a new grower or something like that, and something that I've never seen or heard of speaks to me and fills in one of the spaces here in the plan. Let's take a look around the garden at some of the areas where I know I could go overboard filling them in with flowers and perennials. And so we need to pump the brakes and get some trees and shrubs in there before I fill the entire thing with roses and peonies. I do have a video on Procreate, how I draw using this app Procreate on the iPad for my landscape design and drawings. which we'll go into in a little more detail. So for this first area, this long side of the fence, it's mostly sun. We have a telephone pole that I would like to camouflage either with, if I can find the right, narrow and upright conifer. I'm open to that, but my preference is for something like a slender hinoki cypress, or I like the Horseman Blue Atlas cedar. So something that has a little bit of a more open branch structure, but I'd like to do a group of 3 of them. Perhaps having 2 inside the fence to kind of like stagger in front of the telephone pole, and then a 3rd one outside the fence. If you have seen my design and planning video, I am very interested in keeping some of the bigger elements outside the fence because I love flowers. I want to maximize my sunny border space as much as possible. But I also, we have this really beautiful, architecturally interesting fence, so that we may be staining the same like dark off black color of some of the woodwork. And so I would like to try to bring the plants over and through, almost through the fence, by treating the outside of the fence as kind of part, because you can see it. And I don't want to just create like a huge blocky screen of like arborvitae or something. It's just texturally not my style. So, so some of the plants that I'm considering for this area are 20-foot and under crepe myrtle, possibly muskogee. I think some of these may get a little bigger than they're supposed to, than they say they do. So, but probably in like a dusky lavender color for the flower color. And I would love to get something with 4 trunk form. So possibly the trio of conifers. The crepe myrtle, I think, is probably the right choice for this bed. There is a lot of lavender in this bed, and in the early spring, there's also some like brick and old rose colors, especially in the peonies. Since the crepe myrtle won't be in bloom then, I don't know that it's so critical. And then I have 2 Diablo 9-barks that I think are finally in a place where they're happy. So they are putting on some growth and some size. So those will actually get somewhere in like the 6-7 foot, let's call it 6x6 range. They are not evergreen. The crepe myrtle is not evergreen. So because we don't want this to suddenly go back to feeling like there's nothing there in the winter, I'm looking for something like, there are some new really, really interesting light green, raspberry green, and white flowered loropetalums, Chinese fringe flowers. That's an evergreen shrub here that gets about 4.5, 5 feet tall and wide. I think those would be interesting framing what will be a pretty trunk of the crepe myrtle. And then my imagined blue evergreen would probably be some sort of like blue spruce or a narrow blue pine. This one I'm really going to be open to ideas because it's more important to me that they be, like I was saying, like I don't want them to be really, at maturity I would prefer the base of the tree to not be wider than 12 feet. So I'm not going to get into like the nitty gritty of like the measurements of this, but my fence is 4 feet tall, so you can use that for the scale. It's going to be pretty important to fill the space strategically. And, you know, I think what's interesting about how these layouts are shaking out is that you really hear a lot about using 3s and 5s for things, and not doing a lot of single plants. I don't really subscribe to that, mostly because the plants that I love, some of them are like tree peonies that cost a couple $100s for one plant. So I'm certainly not going to buy 3 of them. But I do think about grouping things together and keeping them. So even if I can't have 3 of the same peony, I might put 3 peonies that have similar color vibes in an area together. So I don't know. I think there are some gardens that can stand up to one of something. And then there are certainly trees and shrubs that you don't need multiples of. The only thing I would say I probably wouldn't do for this evergreen, this to be named later, outside the fence, is an arborvitae, because I only like a few arborvitaes, and you'll see in the next drawing where they appear. So that would kind of be the elements. So TBD whether we do one big tree. I personally like the trio. I think it's more interesting. It means getting slightly smaller trees to make them fit into the same budget. Let's say we could probably get like an 8 or 9 foot tree, evergreen, one tree for that space for somewhere between $300 and $500. If I buy 3 individual trees, it would probably be close to the same amount, but for a slightly smaller size, so that, I can't buy 3 $500 trees for that area. And I'm going to be willing to let certain things grow. And for outside the fence in particular, it would be better to get things a little smaller. So, next section. So, moving on down the fence to the big open corner. There was a really, really unattractive tree in this space that you can see if you go back and watch the tree removal video. And I don't know where this idea came from, because Tim is not owning it any longer, but long ago he talked about wanting a true, tall, full-size southern magnolia. So this is maybe the one spot in the garden where we could do something, as long as it's very upright. We could do something that, maxes out around, I think there's a few in our neighborhood that are 30, 40 feet. And we'd be focusing on some of the varieties that don't get too wide, and limbing it up so it clears the fence. So the other elements in this drawing, so this tree is going to be really critical. I don't know that we'll be able to put any of the other stuff in place until we know what that tree is. A long time ago, we found a couple of really great specimens at a nursery in Delaware, which is about an hour and a half from where we live. It was about a 9-10 foot tall southern magnolia, Bracken's Brown Beauty. So it's a big white flower with the big semi-evergreen leaves. And it was about $900. We didn't buy it because we hadn't had the trees removed yet. And now I can't find any in that size. So I think it's going to be a little work. It doesn't necessarily have to be Bracken's Brown Beauty, though I do think the flowers on that tree are beautiful, and it kind of fits this was always kind of planned for this space, so I've always sort of used those specs when thinking about it. I don't think we would do one of the smaller ones there, just because it is such a wide open corner. It would provide year-round a little bit of like privacy and buffer from that corner. There's a few, like I said, there's a few in our neighborhood that they do really well here. They're really beautiful trees. And I swear Tim came up with this, but now he's like, oh, I didn't suggest that. But I tell you what I wouldn't want to do here. I would not want to do a giant like cedar or cypress or pine. I just wouldn't want to do a big evergreen. I think you can see pretty clearly our neighborhood is full of a variety of shade trees and big evergreens. This is also the same corner where there were about 5 white pines planted really too close together, and this was a pin oak tree in this corner. I don't think that an evergreen is the right choice here. I think it's going to have to be something that is not deciduous like a magnolia. So TBD, we'll see what we can do. And you might have noticed I'm drawing things for future scale. They're clearly not going to be these sizes when we put them in. And then since we're just to give you an idea, we're moving down the fence. So that's one of the 9 barks that was in the other drawing. I have 2, they're kind of small now, but they're actually growing. I have a calacanthus on the left, a burgundy calacanthus. That's doing really well, deciduous. And the other tree is a grace smoke tree. So a little bit softer. Something really beautiful in front of that magnolia, if I can get one that I can limb up. So you can kind of see into the corner a little bit and kind of plant some stuff underneath. Peeking out would be like one of the smoky, dusky colored oak leaf hydrangeas, maybe 3 of them. And then this perspective is the right one to look at trees and shrubs, but I can assure you there's plenty of depth in these beds that I can do lower front of the border type things. And so the golden yellowy orangey is an arborvitae called Ember Waves. I really want 3 of them for this space, but their width at maturity is something that I'm going to need to investigate, and also their growth rate. If they do achieve their full size of 18, 20 feet tall with 10 foot, 12 foot width, 3 might be overkill. But if it truly is the beautiful colors that they show online when you look at the photos of this tree, I have a feeling I would be cutting from it a fair amount. It's just really beautiful. It does not look like a dead arborvitae like some of the other ones that they have tried over the years to make in this kind of goldeny color. It's still fairly green in the spring, but it kind of looks like fall all year, the rest of the year. So that's the ideal for there. There is another option for their tiny tower, is a slightly smaller arborvitae and less colorful, but we'll see. So turning the corner and heading up the fence, it's not going to be a garden of only daffodils, although that's what it looks like right now. I have a few deciduous trees and shrubs in here already. I have 2 fairly small Winecraft black smoke trees. They are in that 5x5 range. I have a very tiny Rising Sun redbud, which is on a weeping format. This all lost its leaves. They're just leafing out now. And then there are a few climbing roses that I'm training over the fence, a few hydrangeas and things like that that are very hard to see in the drawing. So this area is super lacking in anything to look at in the winter besides bare twigs. So here's where I would like to find maybe a blue to olive, gray green, conifer, evergreen texture that gets maybe 6 to 8 by 6 feet wide. We don't really want to plant screening trees on the street here. And then I would say I have a really beautiful dappled willow that I kind of sketched in just to show you where it is. And I think if I could find one of those gray to olive green to white loropetalums, this would be another place to do a couple of them. Just so that, because the dappled willow is a really beautiful plant 3 seasons of the year and it's just whippy twigs in the winter. So it would be nice to have it with something. I guess the other thing that might be in place as this project evolves if I can find the right evergreens for this, I think this view will be interesting through the arbors, which is obviously not the angle that I drew this at, because I'm turning the arbors into a tunnel by running additional wire through them and doing a rose tunnel. So even though that will also be bare in the wintertime, I think it will be really interesting. And so it may not be tree or branch structure, but there will be, the physical structure of the rose tunnel in this space. It's one of those tough videos where it's really hard to try to explain like what's in my head, which is why we're talking about this after I drew it, because you do not want to watch me just like erase things over and over again. All right, so back of the office. So this is the dark color of the paint that we are planning to do all the trim of our house, and potentially our fence in not exact same color, but similar. I have plans to add some additional white containers to this area, and this is a place where I would really love to repurpose some shrubs and trees that we already have. So I have a really interesting blue atlas cedar that was serpentine that I sort of let start to go to the side. It's in front of my office, so essentially I'm talking about just moving it to the other end of this bed and using it under the red maple because it will get a face of sun, and it almost will sort of divide these beds. We're not looking at the right angle for it, but I have sort of like a raised bed that transitions into this back weird warped hill that will get stairs and a little landing patio and stuff on eventually. So I sort of want to use something besides the maple to divide this area, to sort of kind of separate the gardens. So then I have my husband likes to buy plants in threes. He really subscribes to that 3-5 rule. And he bought these 3 really pretty double file viburnums a few years ago, and they've sort of kicked around the garden. We never found the right place for them. 2 of them, one of them we sent to a rental property that we own because it needed some landscaping. And one of them is really tiny and just never thrived. And one is sort of turning into this shape. So that's kind of the other green leafy structure. Under there, that's bare in the winter. There are some really pretty but tiny, currently very small hydrangeas in Tiny Tough Stuff. And Tiny Tough Stuff Twist and Shout, maybe. Oh, these names. They're worse than lipstick and nail polish color names. So this is obviously what they'll look like in a year or 2. Well, 3. One of them is a decent size. And then this is another area where I'm going to have to just kind of wait to see what emerges. The plan for here is to do natural stone steps cut into the hillside and then use a variety of creeping thymes between it to get rid of all of this weedy grass. And then this area would benefit from true foundation plantings. Don't really love the very basic new construction type of foundation plantings, but this is another area where a bright green, maybe even a burgundy or pink toned loropetalum would be good. This is an area that might be able to do the right rhododendron, the right azalea, because it's fairly shady right up against the house. And in those pots where the white pots are, I tend to do caladiums. So they really pop against the dark because I tend to use the white and green and pink ones. So 2 plants, well, really most of the plants I already have here. It's just trying to figure out what that potentially evergreen shrub is going to be to kind of go under that's the back of our living room window. And then moving down the house, we have this little fence that is screening all the air conditioning things. It's an old house. We have 2 or 3 different systems. So again, TBD on what that kind of evergreen texture might be. I would actually love to put something right in the middle of those 2 windows, but We have a special needs kitty that lives in our basement, and my husband does not want her. That's our window where she likes to look out at everything, so he doesn't want that blocked. So, I mean, I want her to have a nice view too. But we'll see. So I think my option is to do something. I have one more of these Diablo 9 barks because, again, Tim bought 3 of things. So I have one more. That area might be slightly too shady for it, so it may not ever get too big. The other plant that exists in this area is I have a gorgeous, almost fully grown. I bought it pretty much full grown, 6+ feet tall, Ruby Falls Weeping Redbud that is currently just flowering. And that I drew that in. And then this is an area, originally when we bought the house, there was a trellis and there was a bunch of like privet hedges and stuff kind of screening this area. So let's say I get Horseman Blue Atlas cedars for the trio that's kind of opposite this to screen the telephone pole. Then this would be the place to do the slender Hinoki cypress, or vice versa. I think having some kind of narrow, upright conifer would be great here. Our house is elevated a little bit, so something that maxes out at 20 feet, up to 20 feet would be fine. Again, as long as that width is not too crazy. And because I think our house is pretty. With the stone, I don't want to necessarily have it be like Christmas tree or Charlie Brown. It's got to be like somewhere in between. So the Hinoki cypress is a good choice because it's interesting. There's some cryptomerias and things like that I've taken photos of. So this one I'm again kind of open on depending on what we find. This area has been tough. It's super, super weedy. The bulbs are coming out now, but I think this would be a nice place to do some sort of hydrangea kind of hedge. I have an Invincible in there. A lot of the colors in this area are kind of pinks and berry tones and things like that. So something like that is, I guess, another option. Yeah, I feel like I don't want to go too crazy with this area yet because it still needs so much work in terms of weeding. There's some kind of like perennial fern weed underneath the cardboard, and it's very aggressive. It's like aliens just popping out everywhere. I'm actually the most excited to work on these, but I feel like my friend just came by. We were trading plants for something, and was like, where did it all go? So these 2 walkway beds, you'll see that they're mirrored. My house is a colonial, so center hall, mirrored on either side with the porch. These were my first 2 little gardens, and I didn't really have a plan. I just went out and got stuff that I liked. And as I have finally, over this last year, started to get garden beds and stuff into shape, I have some shrubs that have been here for 2, 3, 4 seasons now. So they're decent sizes. And they were not the right size for these beds. So, and these beds just got wild and crazy because I like variety. And this is the one place where I'm willing to accept the idea of foundation plantings. Because these are just like tough areas. They were super manageable for my first gardens, but so this first one I have pulled almost all the shrubs and plants out of. I just got a really beautiful upright magnolia, one of the deciduous magnolias. So it looks like Royal Star, but it's blush. So it's called Centennial Blush. And I really wanted that to go in a spot where I know I'm going to cut from it so I can keep this size and shape somewhat controlled. We'll talk about that when we go do some cutting. But I actually really strategically cut from my garden. So if I'm shaping something, I'll cut from it and arrange it. So obviously this is aspirational. It's 3 feet tall right now. It's not going to be 11, 12 feet tall for a little while. But I have these bare branches that I sometimes let clematis and things climb up. And so I know that this is a space that can support something kind of branchy and interesting. And actually, because it does lose its leaves and it gets like the little pods and stuff on it, it might be really pretty with Christmas lights and stuff. So that's going to be a fairly straightforward like swap. I'm just going to be taking away the skeleton branches and putting in an actual plant. The Korean spice viburnum, we had several of these at our rental house, and Tim absolutely adores this plant. I almost feel like I couldn't do these drawings side by side, but I almost feel like I need to show them both at the same time. So we had a very old lilac in the garden in this spot on the other side when we bought the house, and it's what got me started gardening. One year the snow came off the roof and knocked it forward, and it was blocking the window. And so I took my favorite wedding tool, zip ties and pruners, and went and started shaping it. And this year we had a really tough winter. I would estimate, based on the size of the lilac, that it's 30 plus, maybe more years old, because it's 15 feet tall some places, and it appears to be dead. It's really sad because it was my first plant that I took care of. We're just meeting. This is my first garden too. We had a garden at that other house, but Tim had landscaped it, so I didn't really have to do anything. And there is something really nice about having a fragrant lilac right outside your window. Tim does really let me do what I want for the most part in the garden. So he really loves the lilac. So the idea is to replace the lilac that died, add more to these beds. And so this one on this side, because the Centennial Blush Magnolia is going to be there, I'm also doing Beauty of Moscow, another kind of pink to blush lilac. And then I'm going to move the Korean spice viburnum so that it's sort of in front of the magnolia tree. And so, again, this is not great perspective, but I can assure you it's like deep enough. So, and then the other thing, I have really struggled with this area is how to do evergreens without putting a hedge under the windows, because we want to have the fragrance coming into the windows. And we have these window wells for that basement kitty. And I could just, in all the years of shopping for plants, I've never seen something that was like, oh yeah, that should go there. And so I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm thinking about doing a boxwood hedge in this area, a boxwood in several boxwoods in kind of abstract cloud formations, because as you can see at the finale of the drawing, Tim has always wanted to uplight from the window wells, uplight the stone of our house for that texture. And the window wells are the least attractive part of these beds. And I just think, I don't think that I could do just like a straight or curved hedge. It just doesn't feel like something that I could do. Maybe when I'm like messing around with boxwoods at the garden center, I'll be like, oh, okay, I like it. But right now I am thinking it's going to be something like this cloud formation. And maybe I'll get like Edward Scissorhands on it. We're cat people. So maybe I'll turn the two clouds into sleeping cats or something. Who knows? I wouldn't rule it out as something that I decide to try. So, TBD. I got to go out and look at some boxwoods. I would imagine that something like winter gem would be a good choice for this, for my area. I just can't see myself doing just like a square edge of them or even like a rounded globe. So this is sort of where I'm at, and I know it's just a drawing, but I do think it looks pretty cute. And I think it will be nice. As you can see, this is why I specifically drew it on its own, or took a screenshot of it on its own, because almost everything else that I'm thinking about doing in these beds is deciduous. And while they're not small beds, they're not big enough to do something like even a narrow conifer. So I can't believe I'm considering any kind of boxwood hedge. This just feels very counterintuitive to who I am, but they look kind of cool in the drawing. We'll see what they look like in reality. So this is the side where you can see the dead branches of the lilac we're losing. I'm going to immediately start pruning the new plants into the same shapes. I have a Miss Kim already going in here. I'm going to be replacing this one with President Gravy. And this mechanical corner that we have where our electrical meter and, eventually we're going to replace, or the downspouts will be either the same dark color or they'll be like the faux copper or something like that. But this is where our back porch is, and I'm training wisteria around that. So I'm actually thinking of adding a wisteria on a really tall, I use copper poles to support them. I'm thinking about doing a very, very, taking one of the 3 trunk plants and really wrapping it up a big copper support so that we get some more camouflage in that area. I have like a little obelisk thing with some clematis on it, but it definitely does not do a good job of hiding that electrical meter, which these are the things you don't think about when you're renovating a house. I deeply regret not moving that. We had to do all new electrical. I'm not entirely sure why we didn't move that somewhere else. We just didn't think about it at the time. So again, I'm not a super symmetrical person, but my house is very symmetrical. And so I think we would do probably another cloud here or a cat sculpture. So we'll see. But I don't know. I'm just kind of feeling this. We'll see what happens when I'm faced with the reality of going out and picking shrubs. But so that's the plan. And the thing that's great, so I obviously do this for my own, I think it's fun to daydream and imagine what the possibilities are. But the other thing that I do with these drawings is I show them to my husband, because he has a very hard time picturing things when I'm just like standing there pointing at things. So armed with these drawings, we can now go out into the world and look for shrubs and trees to fill in some of these spots. So that was part 1 of figuring out what we need to look for. And now I'm gonna go out in the world and try to find some of these things, and I will bring you along with. There's a few things that I already have, a few things that I had to order the lilacs from a specialty nursery. They're not widely sold. The Beauty of Moscow and President Gravy. But other than that, I think we're in pretty good shape. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe. That way you can find out what happens if I actually find all of these plants and start getting them in the ground. During the pandemic sabbatical that I have been forced to be on for a very long time, YouTube is my only source of income. So if you find my videos helpful, please like and subscribe and share them with a flower-loving friend. You can check out my Instagram at Sullivan_Owen. I am now making things from the garden every few days now that things are starting to really grow, and sharing, a little bit more of the day-to-day over there. So thanks again for watching. Happy spring, and I'll see you guys soon.